I think I was very much affected by what was happening in the 60s, and working for social change became extremely important to me. I saw a lot of things wrong and wanted to be doing something.
Poor people here, they had just tried so hard to get somewhere and couldn't until they just didn't want to try anymore. But the VISTA showed them, you know, that things could be different.
The 60s has often been called the angry decade. There were years of assassinations, violent anti-war demonstrations, and race riots. But the 60s was also a time for an emerging and powerful idealism in this country, a quest for social justice. It was shared strongly by America's youth. And it was the energy of America's youth that was channeled into federally funded social programs when President Johnson declared a war on poverty. One of these programs was VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. Many of the West Virginia VISTA volunteers chose to stay on after their tour of duty was over. This is the story of 3 of those who stayed. How the VISTA experience changed their lives, and in varying degrees, how the VISTA volunteers changed the lives of many southern West Virginians. We begin in Raleigh County, in the community of Fireco.
I was influenced by the Kennedy administration and by the war on poverty that had begun, and by a lot of the political activity that was going on college campuses at the time. VISTA was a way to become involved.
Fireco was Craig Robinson's first assignment. At that time, VISTA worked closely with the county's Community Action Association, and it was through the Raleigh County office that the 22-year-old from Buffalo, New York, met Martha Thaxton. Martha conveyed to Craig the desperate need for a water line in her hometown of Fireco.
Because there had been no water in this particular area of Fireco since about 1948, since about 1947, 48. And before this time, people carried their water out of the creek, which they tell us is polluted, or from a spring about 2 miles up in the holler.
Well, the first thing was to go around, was to talk to people in the community one-on-one. People volunteered their labor at that meeting, and they also agreed to take advantage of the Community Action Credit Union and to secure a small loan from that credit union.
The pipes and fittings were bought, and construction of the water line into the black section of Fireco began in early summer.
Without him, there just would not have been water in Fireco, because he provided the technical skills that people had been trying for years, you know, asking their supplier, you know, to extend water to the community, but they weren't successful. When Craig came in, he negotiated with the supplier, and he did find a way.
The actual work of putting in the system was I thought, a lot of fun. There were some great characters in the community that we got to work daily with, side by side. You know, people told stories about working on the railroad and working in the mines. Well, of course, these miners were quite experienced with dynamite, and they kind of enjoyed getting back to it. And so they, whenever we'd come across a little bit of rock, it was really nothing for them to run down and get some dynamite and run some wires to their car battery and shoot it. It was obviously something to take some pride in. It wasn't a massive undertaking by any means. It was pretty modest, but it was something that was tangible and concrete, and meant something for some people that I'd gotten to know pretty well. And I took real pleasure in that. After a while, I began to learn about that term, radical, and I let's put it this way, I think I aspired to be a radical, which was someone who was interested in change.
After spending time with the coal miners of Fireco, Craig became interested in occupational lung disease. Miners were not being compensated for black lung, and they were starting to organize to fight what they felt were inadequate laws.
What I was able to do is to pull together some of the research that was done on lung disease of coal miners, and to help pull together people, miners and disabled miners, to discuss the issue and discuss the legal aspects of the issue, the medical aspects of the issue, and to work with them on figuring out what to do about it.
No longer are we going to live and work and die like animals. We're free men!
What was done was that, number one, was a massive public education that took the form of rallies. The rallies were very dramatic, very exciting.
It's very small, and they said it was a wildcat. There's no wildcat strike to this. This is a strike by profusion. And what I mean is it spreads like fire does on a prairie.
Dr. Buff was a very fiery speaker who was able to attract a lot of attention. During the legislative session, when it became clear that it was going to be difficult to get a bill out of a committee, there was a statewide coal strike that lasted for a couple of weeks. And it was successful in bringing pressure on the legislature to produce a bill and to recognize informally that black lung was a compensable disease.
From this effort sprang movements for union reforms and coal mining safety.
For other people.
In a great many ways, I came of age in West Virginia. I really, although I was a government major in college, I learned about politics and government mostly here in West Virginia. It shaped the way I think I ought to be spending my life in terms of work. I stayed in West Virginia after my VISTA days because I liked living here. I felt a part of the community. I had a lot of friends here. And it always seemed like there was something to get involved in, some work to do that was important and interesting. So I would definitely say that as a VISTA volunteer, West Virginia gave to me a lot more than I gave to it in terms of the impact on my life and in terms of the education that I got.
We will reach into all the pockets of poverty and help our people find their footing for a long climb toward a better way of life. This bill will permit us to give our young people an opportunity to work here at home in constructive ways as volunteers, going to war against poverty instead of going to war against foreign enemies.
On August 20th, 1964, President Johnson signed into law the Economic Opportunity Act. VISTA was chartered and funded under this act. By January 1965, West Virginia Governor Hewlett Smith had requested 260 VISTA workers for service in primarily the state's southern counties. In April, the first volunteers arrived for duty in perhaps the poorest county in the state, McDowell County. When the VISTAs arrived in West Virginia, the national unemployment rate was 4.5%. West Virginia's unemployment rate was 7.8%, which translated into 47,600 people without a source of income. By the end of the decade, 15% of West Virginians were at or below the poverty level. VISTAs came to the Mountain State from across the country. After training sessions, they were dispersed throughout the hollers and hilltop communities. In addition to coal mining issues, VISTA volunteers became involved in tax reform, welfare rights, health issues, fair elections, and youth activities. A special emphasis was placed upon education. West Virginia had one of the highest illiteracy rates in the country. By living in a community, a VISTA would assess its needs. They were often dropped off in isolated areas with very little supervision from the program staff, a frightening experience for some.
My most vivid memory of arriving there was I went across a swinging bridge across the creek to his house, and I remember walking on the bridge and thinking, if I can do this, if I can walk over here and ask this person if I can stay with him, I can probably do anything. And I was really scared, but I just found on the other side the most wonderful person who said, sure, come on in, and just took me into his home and his family.
Ruth Yarrow was a college junior in Iowa when she signed for a summer term with VISTA. She was assigned to a small mining camp called Peter Cave Creek.
And it turned out 5 of his grandsons moved in too at about the same time. And so I became the person that he taught me how to cook on his wood stove, and he was real good about my mistakes. You know, I didn't do so well with biscuits, and so he started buying canned biscuits for me to cook, which I could handle.
Today, Peter Cave Creek is abandoned, but in 1966, Ruth lived with the Jude family while working as a tutor for elementary school children. Those 3 months with a small Appalachian mining community had changed her.
It was definitely idealism. It must have been wanting to see things go better in this country and feeling like we could contribute something or we could do something, but not really knowing what it was. When I finished college, I came back into the VISTA program. The place that I came to was Marbone Creek in Mingo County. My first impression was that it was not so isolated. There were several stores and sort of gathering places. And there were some older, smaller houses, and there were some new kind of modern houses.
Again, Ruth concentrated on education concerns. In this building, she worked on what was then a very new and effective Head Start program for preschoolers. Her work spread to the elementary school, where she became instrumental in correcting a widespread discriminatory practice.
They had a free lunch program that had started, and the parents felt, who had kids that were receiving free or reduced lunches, felt that the kids were discriminated against. The kids were told, okay, you free lunchers, go sit over there. It was very derogatory. And we helped set up some meetings, and eventually people did approach the school board and were successful. I think there was very mixed feelings. The people who worked with VISTAs, of course, really liked having VISTAs there, and obviously in Mingo County, the school board was not real pleased with us because we were helping people get organized to confront them. I would say that I definitely did a lot of growing and a lot of thinking, and solidified my values when I was at VISTA. I think it was one of the most important times in my life. I guess I think that I still, in smaller ways, feel that what I do needs to be in the direction of making things better. And that's something that I learned as a VISTA.
Here in Raleigh County, the VISTAs may not have been given a chance to explain, you know, why they were here and what it was that they wanted to do. I think they were basically judged on how they looked, or how they talked, or how they lived, or where they lived, without really trying to get to know them and what they were trying to do.
I would say that our biggest Well, you know, when you're doing something good, you're going to get criticism. I don't give a damn where it's from. You're going to get it. And the short dresses, really, I caught more hell on the short dresses than anything else, and I didn't see nothing wrong with them. If they wanted to wear the short dresses, that was their business. But it was a style from where they came from, so then the first thing we knew, we looked around and the damn girls in the local population was wearing shorter dresses. So I didn't see it hurt anything, so we just let it, it was something for somebody to criticize something about because they were jealous of what they were trying to do. That was the whole thing in a nutshell.
They brought hope more than anything else. Different skills, I guess, show us different ways to do things.
They had a great impact on my life, and I haven't forgot it either. In other words, we were fighting strip mining, you know, and there weren't no vistas here then. And through their teachings and instructions on how to do, I learned a hell of a lot from them because we stopped the damn strip miners.
Over a period of time, and unfortunately, the people were beginning to realize that they couldn't see themselves out of a situation. They had tried on previous occasions and many times to get things done, but they were just unable to. So they just didn't want to try anymore. So fortunately, when the visitors come in, they were able to restore the confidence in the people. And even more so, they were supportive in accompanying them on various projects to see that they would get something done.
The reward mostly was for doing people that couldn't do for themselves. And I think that they were very dedicated. I think that they wanted to see a change and come about, and the only way to get this change was long, hard hours and dedication. We had local vistas, and they worked hand in hand. The local vistas, you know, would talk to the young vistas that come in here about, you know, they knew more about the people here than what the strangers did. So you had a damn good combining force, in my opinion.
I was 18 when I joined VISTA. I grew up here in Whitby. I lived on a farm over on that mountain, and I feel like that was a real advantage as a VISTA volunteer because the majority were from out of state. And I knew what the problems were firsthand, and I knew the resources among the people.
Roger Mooney was assigned at his request to his hometown of Whitby to work in the areas of education and community development.
What we were told to do was to set up a program for the children. And we were told to work on community projects and to work with some of the adults in education or whatever they identified as needs. The church was the center of community activity. We did educational programs with the preschool kids. We had books where we worked with some of the developing language skills, encouraged self-expression. We worked with the adults, and the adults identified working on their high school diploma as something that they would like to do. I'm sad to see the school gone. I'm sad to see what the mines has done to the mountains. I feel good about the work that I did. I feel good about the people that I worked with here, because I do feel like that. Like I said, several of them went on to school, several of them are working. That's part of, I guess, the message in the 60s was that we can look at it inside and we can generate alternatives. We can bring change. And we hoped that we could unite the residents to bring about some lasting changes. We did. I don't think we could have been in VISTA and not been aware of some of the issues that were going on during the times. And we knew when we started and when we made a commitment that we were going to step on people's toes, that once you identify specific deficiencies in the community or in the social system, whatever we want to call it, and bring attention to those inequalities, the discrimination. We knew that we were going to be in the public eye, but I felt like that it was okay, that if we could bring about some kind of change, then it didn't matter if we won a popularity poll.
So you haven't lost the idealism?
No, no. Doing it in another way, but not lost the idealism, no. Hope I never do.
The Vistas were stepping on toes, and by late 1967, the program in West Virginia had come under fire. Politicians complained that the Vistas were overstepping their bounds, that they were involving themselves in issues that shouldn't concern them as poverty fighters. They were called troublemakers and communists. They were accused of immoral conduct. A group was even arrested under charges of sedition. After months of pressure from the political structure, Governor Smith wrote to Anti-Poverty Director Sergeant Shriver, asking for the removal of West Virginia Vistas. A federal investigation disproved the charges, and the Vistas remained. Former Vista administrators say they knew if they were to be effective, they were going to get complaints.
It was the local people who decided that I'm going to participate in this system, and I'm going to let my voice be known, and I'm going to make sure that the rights that I have are upheld. Those are the ones who were the threat. But the AVs and the Vistas were the ones who were visible. They were the ones that were most easy to attack, you see.
We were researching to see how the Head Start money was being used and who was benefiting. So I was invited down after several months because the school administration was going to put on a little play. And they did a shadow play, you know, where you put sheets up with the lights behind. And it was on Head Start and outsiders coming in. And it ended dramatically with a sword going through the VISTA program and the American flag being raised in triumph. So I think I was catching a message that night, which was done with some vigor, that the local school officials were taking issue with the way that our VISTA program was defining about where that money should go.
We knew we were going to have to challenge some interest. A lot of local politicians, rather than try to change and become the type of local leader that people wanted and needed with a new perspective, you know, they would fight the change. And the superintendent of schools in Harlan County one time told me, said, "Now, Mr. Ogle," said, "one thing you've got to recognize is that the people in Harlan County are like children, and you have to treat them that way."
The volunteers took a lot of the heat for criticism West Virginians wouldn't put onto the shoulders of other West Virginians, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of the role of being an outsider, is to be that lightning rod.
We've started a domestic peace corps called VISTA. 9,000 Americans have volunteered to serve in that for $50 a month. The first 30 of them have already been recruited, selected, trained, and dispatched to a dozen different American communities. They're on the job right now. A neighborhood youth corps has been organized.
As the times have changed, so too has VISTA. VISTA still operates in West Virginia, but volunteers no longer assess the needs of a community. They are assigned to specific tasks. But older residents in West Virginia will always remember the Vistas from the turbulent 60s. One resident calls them a special breed. They were young and idealistic and came to fight the war on poverty. The war was not won. Those who stayed came to West Virginia believing they could make a difference, and on a very personal level, they did.
It taught us a lot about what the world was like and about what kinds of things needed to be done in order for people's lives to improve. And in a way, it was a humbling experience because it was clear that there was no easy way, that things weren't going to happen quickly.
What they were saying is that you can change this if you want to. If you want, get up and go and see why this is like the way that it is, and work on it. Let's work on it together and see what will happen. We didn't always have successes. even working with the VISTAs. But if that didn't work out, then we tried something else, so that they were always there providing that type of encouragement.
I think the joy of what we accomplished will always overcome the bad times. And I think we owe a lot of it, most of it, to the Appalachian volunteers and the VISTAs. Because in their guidance of how to go about it and what to do, I say they helped us tremendously. I have no regrets.